소리 약간 소소니 대가 답지 강이 마보자 패거래 체인지 동다다 메시지 소리 내가 참 기한 다 패거래 대통령 최대 내가 동지체 자만을 다시 데려줘.
So my Dharma friends, you've come here today from many different places, some very far away, and even from different countries. And coming here may have been very difficult also. And also in order to come here, you stopped for the time being all your activities for the purpose of this life, and you came here. So for that, I would like to sincerely thank you, and first of all say hello, Dashidelek.
Thank you. 이날 같은 것들이 내가 조금 용도였는데 상지 그때 말을 보지 네 지도 쇼는데 페트바다 하장 까와서 그랬어. 강진아들이 상지 그때 말을 보지 강리 로봇 동안 민족 보스 대화 탐지 용원에서 다 로어로 소치 동의 싸움지 맞춰반들이 나 탐치르더니 이 동의에 탑메라 셀 탑고요래 그 셀 탑라더니 록이라더니 셀고요래 그 답이 저기 말록라더니 다 답을 듣다가 야기 송요래지 옛날에 남 생기 동의에 레다 남이라더니 도드메 바다 라시 작은 마보요래 물을 보고 돌아다 그런 마보요래 그 탐지를 니 동생이 싸웠지 오늘더니 답이 출력 탐지를 맡더니 싸게 듣고요 말이 그 헬스티니 다다다 답이 출력된 싸주구나 그 타고 가서 소소한 냥들랑 애들이 랑 조는 이를 조를 남동 타고 그래 대회는 대표 봐서 뭐 괜히 말이지 심지 탐지가 또 피고서는 배고래 셔대니 저더니 속과 총총이 동같이 뭐 내가 괜히 이제로 그렇게나 내가 하도 동치보를 쌈지면 잡을 있는 거 소리.
So even though this might be a small gathering, and we have come here because we follow the precious teachings of the Buddha, and therefore this gathering, coming here to this gathering is really a great fortune. So what are those precious teachings of the Buddha? The precious teachings of the Buddha are the single medicine for the suffering of all sentient beings. It is the source of all happiness. So sentient beings suffer inconceivably. So sentient beings need a method, a way to become free from suffering. And in general, we have two systems to clear away suffering. That is the worldly system and then the various religious traditions. So in the worldly system, humans have developed this world greatly, but still they have been unable to dispel the suffering, continuous suffering. And suffering still continues to ripen. And sometimes there is nothing that they can do about it, and then they are overwhelmed and even commit suicide. Many people even spoil their precious human body because they cannot overcome their difficulties. So in order to uproot suffering altogether, we need to rely on the holy Dharma, and that is the only way to entirely uproot suffering. So somebody who practices the holy Dharma first becomes liberated from suffering themselves, and then they show the path to liberation also to others. And such a one is called a Sangha. A Sangha is somebody who benefits beings. And so also you have come here with the intention to benefit all sentient beings. And so for this reason, even though this might be a small gathering, it is very significant. Actually, if even 4 Sangha members come together, already it is very meaningful. So this gathering is really an incredible merit.
권초선인데 내가 권초선 기발이야. 개발은 배송나? long Bamba was on already. Tayo di lobang chira mewa chura teba yowa. Tingata ngata ngato tawo ke ko kali kunji no. Tampon de tin kam saji jongwa kombare. Saji su chusu ba kombare. Chusong de tele jongwa kombare. Jode jo chuchjin de ba kombare. Dewen kun chosen kun ne yo tin cho kare. 람 데라지니 내가 피바 레님의 신이 랑가 따뜻하게 다니게 타봐 타톡 대와 타톡 사지가 고방 탐네 랑동을 존이 인동 랑동 타봐 대다고 했더니 대회는 잡탐적인 초리 대를 공부하지 무슨 일은 하전 남발이 좀 망보리 진짜 주로 요바 공부리 명령이 주로는 나부 주로 좋고 바꾸고리 나부 주로는 좋네 처리는 냠들이 또 바꾸고리 대회는 내가 쇼 특biệt 하장 수는 지 복가와서 뭐 매들이 온초선 온초든 산지 잘해서 주 대래서 보기에는 대나 봤었는데 되는 것도 다른데 와서 겐두 말해 겐두 봐야 되다 뭐서 미 이해로 그러나 뭐람도 답나 되게 감성 생기는 되게 답답해. 제가 그래. 되게 소 겐두 봐도 얘는 꼰초서 잡죠래. 그래서 답에는 되게 뭐람 가르쳤다면 꼰초서 잡죠래. 되는 거요. 되는 서서 그 라운드 bakari 냠서랑나요. 니자 차지게 되게 왔나죠. 넘나 손음 전부 그런 로요래. 되는 되게 꼰초서 잡탐신은 초래스. 되는 족토바데 가와상보리 가와공고에
So it is actually extremely rare to actually even enter this path. And that is why we refer to literally the three jewels as the three rare and supreme ones. So the great scholars could teach on that, explain that extensively according to the scriptures, the scripture authority and so on. But also there is a way to understand it for those who lack this learning, this education, but who still are devoted to the Dharma, and people like myself. So how can we understand the three jewels or these terms rare and supreme? Rare is, first of all, it is very rare, very difficult for a Buddha to even appear in this world. So the appearance of the Buddha is rare. And even though the Buddha has appeared, it is even more rare for this Buddha then to teach the Dharma. And then even though the Dharma exists, it is very rare for there to be followers of that Dharma. And then even more rare for those followers to actually practice the Dharma properly. So the three jewels are for this reason called, first of all, the rare ones. And then supreme, and because someone who relies on this path, first of all, will gain a temporary benefit. And that is because temporarily they understand the workings of karma. And understanding karma, they are able to accept the suffering they experience presently. And then ultimately, as a result, they achieve final happiness, the state of enlightenment. Then they become free from suffering themselves and are able to show the path to freedom also to others. So therefore, supreme. The three jewels are the supreme sources of refuge. And so even though it might seem that there are quite a big number of people following Buddhism, actually generally, it is very rare even. There's very few people who follow any religious tradition at all. And of all these, it is even rarer, even fewer follow the practice of Buddhism. And then of those Buddhists, it is very rare to find those who actually practice it properly. So we can see that only actually just entering this path already is an incredible merit, a great fortune. And so that is the meaning of the three jewels, or the rare and supreme ones. So the three jewels then are, first of all, the Buddha, and then the Buddha taught the Dharma, which is the second, and then from the Dharma arise the Sangha, the third one. And we all actually are a Sangha. If only 4 people come together and make an aspiration prayer, then that will pervade all sentient beings in the 3 realms of samsara. And that is because since we are Sangha, we are supported by the 3 jewels. And therefore, whatever prayer we make, the 3 jewels will support this, and we will accomplish our prayer. And so therefore, with that as a Sangha, whatever path you then enter and practice, and even if you just practice virtue for 1 day, holding a 1-day vow and so on, that becomes an incredible merit. So the 3 jewels are the supreme source of refuge, and we have all entered this path and therefore should consider ourselves very fortunate and rejoice.
내가 자기 추송발랑 장마망제 강의들이 또 등지자 보나 사지기 송도 강릉 즉딘 칸 동다데 즉딘가 동라만 보리 따서 다음에 다가 동섬 동이 즉딘 저 대양만 보마리 대리 치마마요리 즉딘 칸 장미 봐데 대삼절 사지 장미 봐고 거기 추송바이 즉딘 칸 동다데 대장선 내는 도대 강시에 봐 호주만 보송 봐데스 대탐지 틀도 타데스 각각이 소소소소 다 소송하도 남지를 보면 레레레송고 여러 와스 얘는 각각이 틀도 타디 동직도 했어 틀도 대다가 힘보 동직이 동직보이지 강리 특징 넘버 공부에 대다 탐지 공부할 때 동특지 동도 고매요 그래서 공부했어 고를 띄고 맞아요 말이지 같이 강리는 사바의 진지에서 특징 넘버 공부에 대다 탐지 공부를 줘서 이 데리진 바야 주봉 제체지 동거다 상속생은 더서 주봉 뭐 제체지 동도 제가 가지 뭐되나 오 제가 상속생지 들 상속생에서 다 나봐 니서 당가 용되면 양 소속이 냠슬린 탑착해요 말이 그래서 남들이 야삼 랍탑해요 이제
So then when the Buddha taught the Buddha taught the Dharma extensively. In the Samadhi Raja Sutra, the Buddha had said there are thousands of countless world systems. Also, for example, when we offer the mandala, we offer the billionfold world system or the threefold magnitude world system and so on. So there are countless world systems, and in all of those world systems there have appeared countless Buddhas who have explained and taught the Dharma extensively. Although the Dharma is extensive, the Buddha has taught the countless Dharma. Although the words are separate, the sutra says, the meaning should be understood to be a single one. So although the words are separate, for example, there are different ways of teaching, different words explained in the different levels of the path of the sutras, the Bodhisattva path and the Pratimoksha Bodhisattva and Vajrayana path. So there's various words, many different words in all these different paths, but all these different words have a single essence. And so this sutra now says that you should habituate, meditate on the essence of these words. So essentially, therefore, there's only one thing to cultivate, one thing to practice, and that is loving kindness and compassion. So although there are many words explained, many teachings, there is essentially only one thing that needs to be cultivated. And if you cultivate that, you have cultivated everything. And then also elsewhere it is said the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha are included within Bodhichitta. So what is the result? What is the essence of all those 84,000 different teachings? it is to cultivate bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is twofold. There are two types of bodhicitta. And so although I myself do not have so much learning, I do not lack at least the knowledge of practice. So at least I am able certainly to share with you the ways of practice.
특히 공회들이 제 잡지 가연의 샘지가 등이 장미 발에서 샘지 당아 장미 발에 제 잡지 이제 뉴모 버스 송아리 그 사지가 취주 뭐 예체지 동 송아리에서 근데 제 가르쳐서 온 거거든요. 샘지 잡지가 뉴모 예체지 동물이 제가 까빠 장미 발에 샘지 장미 발에서 샘지 상제양 장미 발에서 대회더니 뉴모부 통고 예체지통 레일 예체지통 상교요레스 배는 뉴모부 레일 대상 레일이 벌어 레송 들이 배만고 차송세 어느때 처리는 뉴모부 탐지 강가 돌네 그거 되나 땅소 라니 소비면은 동네 말이 다된 줄이 정스 다들이 소화레스 너는 동네 따가지고 나래스 나한테 뭐 찍고 이피로는 근데 나 이거 말이지 이피로 찍고지나 티스를 나 매가래스 나한테 우리 이피로 찍고 찍고 이거 말이 나 당시에 이피로도 찍네 이 요쪽에 이피로는 찍고 이거 말이 대회는 당연히 냠스를 이kin다 이피로 찍고 조포산지 이피선은 총 산지 용디 탐지 이피로 소에나 대 취주부 예체계 동다와 상행기 찍고 겁나 또 나와요 말에서
So a sentient being suffering is endless and limitless. And what is the cause of all their suffering? The cause is the afflictive emotions. And for this purpose, the Buddha had taught the 84,000 different Dharma teachings. So the reason for teaching so many Dharma teachings is because in the minds of sentient beings, there are 84,000 afflictions. And these are limitless. And Buddhas, for this reason, also have appeared limitlessly. There are countless Buddhas that have appeared. And so there are 84,000 afflictions, and then each of those can be combined with each other, so times 84,000. So there are countless afflictions, and there's an antidote for each affliction that was taught by the Buddha. So for this reason, we have many teachings. There are many teachings of the Buddha. But to summarize it all, where really do all those many afflictions come from? The 37 Bodhisattva practices say, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. It all comes from self-grasping. The self is the root of all suffering of sentient beings. And therefore, the only antidote is the altruistic mind. If you only cultivate an altruistic mind for a moment, in that moment there will be no self. And when there is a self, a moment of altruism will not arise. And even if it seems to arise, if it is defiled by selfishness, then it only becomes deceptive altruism, not a sincere altruism. So knowing to practice truly means to practice the altruistic mind. And therefore, also in the 37 practices, it says, the perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. So all the qualities of the Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. Therefore, the root of the 84,000 Dharma teachings is loving kindness and compassion. And if you only cultivate that, you will be unmistaken.
야, 유모가 탑치가 다 말했봐. 랑그 샘데 이 드시긴 보다 상제 저기 막 하마오네. 나오냐 봐 그랬나. 나 요번에 얘기 시대. 나 요때 나도 요때 이게 이게 되었더니 다 나한테 내와서 인지 문지 고요래. 내가 체도 이는 배는 맞지 bet더니 다마 제거를 내가 차당이 왔지. 세례티니는 유모가 찍배나 나한테 말을 받을 차당이 있잖아. 왜는 노차 찍버렸대나 유모가 나를 창거요래. 노차라 집에 차도라 집에 해당의 집에 세나의 집에 들린 가자. 유모가 세례는 가리 세례는 가니 저땅아 계속 그 유모 보고 제대로 또 차서나 어떤 들은 유모를 간 거래. 야 다들 빼나 도착은 있고 노차도 세나 소리 세는 유모 점바래 다 점바 찍고는 점바가 추천 점바가 조바 점바가 중 점바가 답게 점시 레레로 파싱을 해서 해봐요 거에 TV들이 빼마고 차선이 이 주봉 제리에도 근데 심지어 뭐 바탕을 때 주봉 제리에도 차송시 대 참아 하고는 철이 앞선이지 삼이지 찍고 몸되나 대조바가 답고 잡되는 력차를 빼는 얌선을 빼니 나오지 파티에서 드시네 들이 이보를 차도나 싸가다 라고 듣고 자야 가리 산축센스 산축센스 다 되는 것도 산축센스 저거 군접 산축센스나 저 군접 산축센스 저 산축센스 산축센스 약보를 봐지 제가 되는 군접가 되냐면 그러고 요리지 근데 중요티니가 다시 해요 그거래 군접 대상 코와 등에게 남지 내가 좀 동안 떠들이 차진 씨바 내도 지마 다 레나 바나서 좀 레나 바나서 하도 좁 될지 보고 좀 색더라 왜 개념으로 왔더니 너가 자야 매봐 개념 잡지다 좁다 동리라고 그러라 좁된 독자리지 코라리지 얘는 장쪽은 코는 용기 찍고 가리 코는 삼세요 삼바된 힘지 대다고 자고 대문지 거래서 군족대 쪽방은 싸마 요래서 왜 이들은 코비추 탐지는 삼형제들 대문이 대다고 자고 그래서 대다고 자고 탑러더니 군족대 거가 동에 하장 쪽방을 탐지했나요 그 코비 나니 그 싸마서 형제들다고 자 요래서
So in the beginning, first of all, we need to understand how and from where these afflictions actually arise. So the root of all afflictions is ignorance. And that is not to seem that the mind itself is Buddha nature, itself is the cause of enlightenment. And that knowledge, that seeing is obscured by the conception of an I. Because we perceive an I, because there is an I, there is also the perception of other. And once we perceive other, then there arise thoughts of attachment and aversion. Then definitely we need to create happiness for that self. The self, by all means, need to be happy. And disregarding anything else, we try to create this happiness, and therefore there arises an aversion against other. So this is where all the other afflictions then arise, from this one affliction that arises from ignorance, self-grasping, then all the other afflictions of attachment and aversion arise. And then they are all combined with each other. They lead to each other. For example, if you only think about attachment, within attachment, the 5 afflictions are also complete. There is, for example, the jealousy that arises due to attachment. And then from that jealousy arises anger. And then there is greed that arises from anger. And then there is pride arising from greed, and so on. So each of these 5 afflictions gives rise to another one, so they are combined all with each other. So then there are already 25 afflictions, and then they continue to combine with each other, and we have 84,000 afflictions. So what is the antidote to tame those afflictions? Generally, there's an antidote for each of the afflictions. So, for example, the antidote to attachment and greed is to practice generosity. And then also, with the practice of generosity, all the other perfections are included. For example, there is the moral conduct that comes from generosity. And then there is the patience of generosity, and the diligence, the meditation, and the wisdom that comes from generosity. So also the perfections then are combined with each other, included within each other. So again, there are many, in the end there is a variety. So therefore, in the end, we have 84,000 Dharma teachings. And each of these is an antidote to an affliction of sentient beings. So first we need to understand that, but then when it actually comes to practice, actually the only thing that needs to be cultivated is loving kindness and compassion, and patience that protects your compassion. If you only have that, it is sufficient. So first it is good to understand how afflictions arise, and what is at their root, and what to practice, and so on. But then we must see that the only thing that actually need to be cultivated of all this is bodhicitta. And so today we will talk about the relative bodhicitta. So relative or conventional bodhicitta. So we say that bodhicitta, we all see that this is a good thing. It's a good thing to cultivate bodhicitta. But then what about the relative part there? So the Tibetan word for this relative or conventional here, gunsop, that implies actually something negative. It implies something that is actually like something dirty or defiled. It points to the nature, the suffering nature of samsara. So within samsara, of course, there's only suffering, and we experience only some temporary slight happiness that in the end always leads to more suffering. We in this life experience both happiness and suffering, but for the most part samsara has the nature of suffering and really doesn't have any good qualities. So this term, in this term for conventional or relative in Tibetan, implies something like that, something defiled or polluted, something unreal. So that is samsara, and that is the actual nature of samsara. However, there is one good quality that we could find in samsara, and that is to practice loving kindness and compassion, to practice love as we live in samsara. So that is important to recognize and then to cherish. So although samsara is relative, is defiled, it is polluted, and there's only suffering, there's also a way to develop loving kindness, compassion, love within samsara, as we live in samsara. And so that is the conventional bodhicitta. It teaches us how to develop loving kindness and compassion within this very negative state of samsara.
There is anything is a good sancho sims on there are tanto ni or only just in good job shibati that Hovage Deva Tamji Dungi Jamba the Dungis and Muzingo or the Bena, who would take the Hudson subway. There are jobs, you know, better to lawyer watching, this is short, short and then good, that's to lose the doctor Charles. That don't hear to lawyer what you know. Did it to lawyer was short on, short and to walk on Gusona. That don't hear that doctor, cheat to the doctor. Good job, they say there. Two Deva eating the Dungan but no long to chamber the unit to Deva. Oh, dear, so good to me. samji me chapa te long tu de nyam de ko to ku chu tham chi dong ge jore ti ta wo ko kun jok chi ba jok wa de dong ge jor ko go re dewa tham chi dewa tang ge dong ge ka ri do se we ni chu chi ba na ka ri sa ji ge ku ji de lo ko de ha ta ke chi bon de tu dewa tang dewa ge jot tang den par chu chi so 제일 상으로 또 대화 가리도 다다 근데 이 새끼 저 이상 보는 냠도 되나 칼라시 보도 되게 ጆ지 거리지 나디 ጆ 가리 ጆ 걸어 상으로 다 대추이 ጆ 걸어 상으로 다다 제일 되게 ጆ 거리지 동이 ጆ 거리지 조지가 문제지 다 답치록 당에서 동이 광 탐 초도 봐 군족 사촉 생들 다 동이 ጆ지 문제 때 빵을 타디 동이지 강의 성으로 원래 동이 탑지 나디니 맞은 못 듣기요 말이야 왜나 나 그러면 나 장가도 나 똑도 소리 나 원나 말 맞은 듣다요 말이야 뒤에 당고 나한테 좀 거거리지 나한테 그 류즈지 류즈 딱 고만 거거리 다치지 다차 동이 막발로 돼서 와라 류즈 동이 사자케 히 동이 잠시 노 저베스 루딩이 동이 노 라오리스 루드 드라탄 라오리스 세부 다비들이 차다 그냥 로당디면 거치는 근데 담배 출연 체리 사지 고법도 다 고비 다 집어줘야 그래서 로당디면 거치나 그래서 오늘 띵들어온데
So the conventional meaning of the conventional or the relative bodhicitta, we can see it. We can understand the meaning of that first from the Tibetan term itself, guntsop, which really shows it very precisely what it actually is. So it is the this term dzop, the second term, is like deceptive and defiled. So actually, first of all, it shows that we need to identify the nature of samsara. We think that we find some happiness in samsara, but actually, it always is the cause of suffering. So this term points to the need to identify suffering in samsara. For example, this term defiled or polluted is just like when you're wearing a nice new shirt or so, and then you're eating some yogurt and you spill the yogurt all over your shirt, then the shirt gets dirty, and then you're unhappy because you like your shirt, now it's dirty. So it causes suffering, your beautiful shirt. And so in the same way, this is what happens with all our activities on the conventional level. First we think it is happiness, but then it has the nature of suffering ultimately. Or for example, when you think that being rich, that means you're happy. But actually along with that, again, there is a lot of suffering. So on the relative level, everything has the cause of suffering. So this is what is shown with this term guntsop, or this relative. And so then where we find the Dharma within this relative level, that is where we find the Dharma exactly in our opening, these lines in the opening prayer that we always recite when we say, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. So that is something we should really think about. What is happiness actually? What is your happiness? For example, you might have the company of a good friend, or you might eat some good food. All of that actually has a cause. And thinking about the cause of that is the Dharma. And also likewise, all suffering has a cause. So it is important to recognize the causes of happiness and suffering. And that is the supreme method to abandon suffering altogether. So when we cultivate the conventional, the relative bodhicitta, in order to abandon suffering, we first need to recognize the causes of suffering. Where does suffering come from? There is no suffering that does not arise from self-grasping. All suffering arises from self-grasping. For example, we suffer because things don't go our way, or we feel cold, or we feel hungry. Everything comes from our perception of an I. So it is that I, that self, that need to be destroyed. And also actually because of this I, there is a body. And much suffering again arises from this body. The body has many needs. The body is in pain or gets sick and so forth. Therefore, Marpo Lotsawa also said the body is the body has the nature of suffering. And also in the Sakya it says the body is a vessel of suffering on a vessel of suffering on an ocean of suffering. So the actual enemy to your mind is that body. A hindrance to your mind is this body. So Marpa then continues, so even though the body is suffering, intelligent person who understands to make good use of this body can actually transform it into a vehicle of great merit, because also with this body then actually one can attain the state of enlightenment, and then it can become very precious. But not understanding how to make good use of the body, it actually only becomes a cause of suffering.
Ni part the daji ni ubakap ni jumde lawan be cha de yore dewe ne tri da na so dungye se tabla ni le jumde de shade shina ta ta dungye sam je dani je sa ba o mama jibze ta ta lu la tu o mi chi wa ma kare do sa ri ta ta dewa ben ma chi le ka chi be sha se sa thom o me duma ti da tang sa re nga zo ya ko do nga chachum song sa ri sa gas por sa mo ta na mang por so nam ti jati chi yo te la ta dungi de so na ta so na o me ma lu le dung dik tang sa ri ya no go dungi me chung ma din pa lang sa ri ti ko la sa mo ta ti ta dungi ta ni che to jo ko la sa mo ta ti 가리 쓰는 게 맞지 말랑 이 가리 쓰는 말도 듣게다 때 자가리 준비 미인데 어디 속지 잡고요 말이 뜻이 이게 잡고요 망벌 수 집밖에 거리들 말이 주민을 족과 잡고 가리 쓰지 잡고도 우리 라빠가 동말이 말이 그 코리 세상만을 라빠가 동거 말았어 저 세상 그 제도 지랑된 문제랑 저된 문제 저된 문제는 다 님몽과 척스 다디는 맞은 것 같도 이 말이지 그래서 저 문제는 다 내와 가리도 저된 문제 좀 맞춰서 줘 봐라서 문제 너희 가리도 띠 먹이와 담먹이 저된 문제 이제 각각 세상이 내가 타라게 저거 되나 다트 동이 다니 제치바 마제게 자캅 첨고말 첨들랑 셈이 오리 첨랑 첨리지 마지야 스마니지 랑게 대화랑 쳤고 요리지 랑게 들랑 거로 내가 더르게 돼 봐라가 좀 받쳐서 줘봐서 거 요리지 타도 산지 공방도 벌 쌈띵다 시랍 거 요리지 뒤바르 수주시는 거 라마이 버체 고리 손라니 소리 맞이니 남이 계속 몇이 딱딱 소소가 소소소 토고요. 다들 다니 제 토고요. 비바테 담은 정도라. 마음과 대화가 좋다 토고요. 대회는 답변도 다시 버리지. 다들 라마 작업들 너무 삼지 마셔 봐요. 다들 라마 요거 작업들 라마 매비 작업이 바로 대독 남사다 요래. 얘네 뭐 개가 대독들 라마 요 말이. 라마 요거 작업도 너무 좋은 막 보여라. 특강이 좋아해. 저기 걸어서 못하나. 다 준비해서 봐.
So in the context of conventional bodhicitta, the conventional or relative truth is taught. And essentially the relative truth is the infallibility of karma, cause and effect. And so at the time where there is a perception of self and others, karma, cause and effect is infallible. And in order to clear away suffering, it is necessary to understand the workings of karma, cause and effect precisely. And understanding karma, you will be able to tolerate, accept your suffering now. So it is said, if you wish to know what you did in the past, look at your present body. People wonder, what have I done, what was I before, what have I done in previous lives? But you can see it in your present situation. For example, if you have some happiness, for example, you have some money in this life, then you should think, oh, this is because I have practiced generosity in a past life. Or you might have a good body in this life, and then you should think that this is because I have practiced moral conduct in the past life. And this will be the cause for more happiness in the future. And likewise, it is with suffering. If you are ill, sick, for example, then you should think that this is because I have killed and beaten, abused others in the past. Or if you lose all your money or your wealth, then you should think this is because I have stolen in the past. So if you understand, if you think about the causes of suffering, you will be able to accept the suffering you now experience. And then you might wonder, so why have I actually stolen and abused and beaten others? And having done that anyways, who actually records that? Where is that recorded that I have done that? So that it is still present. Because when you fight with somebody, when you hit somebody, you think that I'm hitting them with my hand, and then lifetimes later it's over. So who has actually recorded that? So people don't believe it in that way. But it is not actually just your hands that hit the other person. If you wouldn't be angry with the other person, you wouldn't hit them with your hand in the first place. So it is because there is a cause of anger in the mind, and that has remained. So it is important to recognize the affliction within the mind. And all of the 6 afflictions arise from self-grasping. So it is necessary to identify the causes of our suffering within the mind. And then the same is true for happiness. When you experience happiness, then you should recognize the causes of that to be generosity, moral conduct, patience, and so forth. When you experience suffering, then you should recognize the causes as the 10 non-virtuous actions, and so on. And so in that way, you can determine your own path yourself. And you will be able to accept your suffering right now, and moreover, you are able to avoid more in the future by observing the law within your own mind. So in that sense, you wouldn't even need to rely on the law of the country anymore, because the law would be in your own mind, and you would find happiness. You would create your own happiness for all future lives. First of all, temporarily, you will be born in the higher realms. And so you recognize that, and then think, therefore I need to practice generosity, moral conduct, and patience, and so on. And ultimately, in order to attain enlightenment, I need to cultivate meditation and wisdom. And along the way, I always need to sustain diligence. So if you just practice according to the 37 Bodhisattva practices, then you will be able to create your own path to happiness precisely. So you're able to tolerate your suffering now, and you're able to create your own happiness in the future. So this is why the Holy Dharma is so precious. And so although we live in an independent country, there is happiness in an independent country, but still there is much suffering. Everyone suffers also. Of course, if we compare that to a country that lacks independence, then an independent country, still a happy country, but still on the personal level, people always suffer without any choice. And so for this reason, it is necessary that we think about what are the actual causes of this suffering. So this is called the causal vehicle.
되게 교육으로 싸움도다나 다다 주로 매바 탐지 그 강리 담마비다라 소바게 생기를 주저받는 시소나 매도 난지 말이 이거 말이지 차와리지 동반이지 지앙하세요 이거 말이지 레좀돼요 말이지 대답 따르요리 대답 따나 따지는 거는 거서 저는 이공 말하는 데 있잖아.如果 녀사는 이 곡들은 샘들이 같이 요래. 어제 샘들 시야면 그도 하고 말. 샘들 시야면서 샘들 냠들. 이 랑게 샘들 뉴모보다도 박차도 돌고 왔다 하마고 왔더니. 데르티니 데다 고쳤더니 딱 고들랑 와로 또 요래지. 데르티니 다다 데르티니 레좀 데데 땅 초바이 시나 데르티니 다다지 저데 뭐뭐리어데 가 내게도 바꾸지 메도 미도 그래시 메도 사우 가도 메도 사우도 저 사우지 가르쳐도 파트와트를 줘요래 사우지는 무슨 세급에 메도 사우들이 난급에 샘제 샘이는 매도가 사용되라 또는 매도가 가도 가래도 옆을 띡도 이거 말이야. 그리고 샘과는 말빨이 나오 녀마 니드나 코 토바미 바니 다 뉴모 제세티 사용되다 하고 는 매도가 나가 되는 매도도 세리 참았지 남들 너 가도 라서가 되네 매도 토는 사용되대요. 사용도 매도 사용도 지었다 와진다 다도 진당 체는 진 사당 차당 체는 매도 제도 제다 제오 나니 좀 그래서 하면 말해 제심을 샤나 들이 이니 다 고독된 하고 요리 고독 누구만 모두 강내 중다 이 강도 다 이제 하고 요리 능이 진 공공 공시나 떼진 거 탑디 다 준주 요리 능이 공 유모가 또 마탑을 때 세면 내요 봐 마시나 다 능이 좀 오는 얼마나 저거 사회를 저거 랍게 요리데 동네들이 생기는 좀대 양다고 마시나 녹이 저 섬타고 요 말, 내가 저 하고 듣고 요 말. 냉떡과는 제가 침못 뛰어서 아마 계속 요 말, 제가 진짜 침만 뭐 하고 요 말. 나한테 중지 뭐 하마오나. 데르티니더니 이제 뒤송공을 좀 맞다 보면은 송발이 송을 대라. 이제 그일 보지가 고았지 요래, 막 고았지 요래. 당연히 고아카카리, 고아 수속 가리 정말 좋고 요래. 육대는 때문에 yap어도 맛이나 키바 쳐보시잖아. 강이 쳐본 정도 요래. 대답을 해야지.
And so when we're thinking about the causes, karma cause and effect. For example, there are some who do not believe in any kind of religion. For example, there are like materialistic views who deny any kind of religion, like communist views and so on. And what they say, for example, their argument is that once we die, we just disappear like a flower withering. Once the flower withers, it is gone. So they assert that once we die, then we just go into emptiness and we're completely gone and nothing exists. And therefore they also deny reincarnation and they deny karma cause and effect. But we can also see, first of all, how this is untrue when we just see ourselves, observe ourselves when we are sleeping at night, for example. You're sleeping there, your body lies in the bed, sleeping, but your mind is dreaming, and so the mind is very active, is doing many things. And that really shows that although the body just lies there, the mind is doing things. So the mind cannot die. And so this is something that they do not understand. And then since the mind will not die, then together with that mind, everything will go that is stored in the mind, all the afflictions, all the habitual imprints. And so because they do not know that, they are trying to demolish the Buddhist teachings or religion altogether. And so understanding karma, cause and effect will show you that the causes are within the mind. So the afflictions, the non-virtuous thoughts are within the mind. So even though the arguments goes that the flower will wither and disappear, but what you could question as a counter-argument is that although the flower does wither, what about the seed of the flower? Where is that seed? That has not disappeared. So the flower is an outer example, but the seed is the inner part of the flower, and that is the mind. So the inner example of the seed is the mind. And so within the seed, the color and the shape and everything of the flower, all the information of the flower is stored. Although nothing is apparent, the color and the shape are not apparent in the seed. And so likewise, within the mind, that seed, because there is that seed of ignorance and grasping at the self, since beginningless time, all the afflictive emotions will continue to arise, just like a flower will continue to grow. And again, the flower will appear with its color and shape and the honey and so on, for as long as the seed remains. So for as long as the seed remains, ultimately, whenever the conditions are right, when there is soil and there is water and so on, the flower will eventually grow. So karma, cause and effect is truly infallible. When you understand that, you understand the relative truth. So on the relative level, we experience much suffering, and understanding that, you will finally understand what are the actual causes of suffering. And so when you think about suffering and the causes of suffering, you will finally make an effort to uproot these causes of suffering as though they were poison, knowing that it still remains within your mind. And so that is important to know, because if you don't really know that, if you're not certain about the workings of karma, then there are still some who take refuge. For example, they say, I take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and in the Sangha and so on. But still, they have not actually yet grasped the causes of happiness and suffering. And for this reason, they are unable to cultivate pure love. They cannot understand the preciousness of pure love, and they cannot really understand the faults of self-grasping. And so this is also what is taught, this is how it is taught in Jigten Sumgön's 7 verses of protection to Tara. And so there's different views, different takes you can take on that text. So Ken Rinpoche here and myself have different views on that, partially. But anyways, you can gain any kind of understanding. You can gain different understandings. But the point really is that if you do not understand truly the workings of karma, then even if you are a great scholar, you will still encounter difficulties.
Sabdan Hasan Karong Sodari Karong Shop Namsri, they all were Lamri. You know, Jumdri Jetemdri Mishibet, Jumdri Juga, Jotan Drevin Amyadi, Ship the Samuel Hamauna. Three shifts on Mumbai, shifts on Mumbai Karion, that Yishi or Maribi, Chibakiva, Tetomango Yori, Tetomango Yamta Lamja Wata Panamton Tokuyo Mari. Then I'm going to talk to 가다 토미람들 왕보 토미람들 망보여라 데르티니 대탐비 강이 주고 띵강이 라비양 갖고 얘네 강이 주고 jet이 준비 때문에 마시 생군난 내로 마도베 이 강이 주고 요리 내 대신 공개양 제가 데려다 와서 걸 거는 이제 보러가 디고로 상호다는데 디소주 상호다다 강을 내내 좋고 요리 이거 정문이 준비해들 샵도 땅은 저때 당보 저삭지 인데면 미치 되는 마데나 다다 시대도는 뭐가 망보 용어를 베라 들 좋아하는 비행 망보 용어 나 용디 메저 피 좋아 망보 용어도 되게 고도 통제치 알아 패게도 좋아를 이내 따면 싸움 땅도 양도 우리 해도
So this verse, Bajradhara Sungen, in this text says, first it begins with saying that although they abide within the true meaning, and so what that means is, abiding in the true meaning is that we do take refuge in the three jewels, and we do enter any of the paths of Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva and Vajrayana, and we do practice that. So it is the true meaning, it is a true path. We do abide in the true path. However, then that verse continues, although they abide in the true meaning, they do not understand the interdependence of cause and effect. So they are ignorant of the interdependence of cause and effect. So although we have found the true path, still we do not know the causes and the results, cause and effect. So for this reason, the text continues, they are ignorant of the true meaning of knowable things. And so due to that, what that means is that because even though they abide on the true path, because they do not understand karma, cause and effect, still wisdom will not arise and many doubts will appear. And they cannot actualize this true path. And so there are many practitioners who have entered the path of higher, middling, and lower capacities and so on. And many of them encounter difficulties on the path. So why is that? The path itself is the true path, but they encounter the difficulty because they do not understand precisely the workings of karma, and that it is only to be found within one's own mind. So many questions actually arise with regard to that, and so Kempo probably could explain that much more extensively because he has much more learning than myself. What we need to understand is that in terms of karma, like how do we accumulate karma, where are those causes, and then how do the results ripen from those causes. And so there are many people ask me many questions, even though actually I do not have so much learning, but people ask me many questions, and from that I can really see that there is much ignorance about those knowable things, which comes down to not understanding karma. So for this reason also I appreciate the questions, because when I am giving answers, it also benefits myself thinking about the meaning of that, thinking about the answer.
내가 접이야 와서 산저 동네마도 매 내가 다톡 니가 안에 저뉴모 바그 접이더라 내가 동네마도 조금에 와 대하고네 대기서더니 따티 나디니 뭐 접어지 사가래지 다산쪽 선배지 사쪽 선배 군 접되는 동네 저 탐지 해라 장첩되는 이 동네 저대 파장네 내가 피부 제에서 처음 욕구를 첩고 그래 피 리바카 이미 로드 페이거리 다디데 파 다치는 로드 파 장니 이미 로드 랩고 첩당 첩되나 대외 뒤동과데 차나 근데 룽아 이송사 강제네요 다치는 로드 총도 땅 이미 로드 망도 땅 늘 갈래지나 일본은 샘도 나징 온 차롱라고 차대요래 그래서 인생을 어찌 주라고래 너는 샘는 자군바 잡아 탐라고 이 고아차한 거래 대회는 이 동사 촉성이 인생을 로도 짜치 보여 봐 대응지 탐라 일본은 저기 주 삼대우나 저기 짜치 뭐 말이지 삼대에서 짜치 버리지 이 상태에서 딱 보고 자시바 차온 거래 대 차는들이 이제 고접 산촉선 다지 산촉선 때 맞지와 기와 탑 강리 다람지는 바탐지 당고 소탈을 함지 배는 호로를 로도 남바질라서 봐 산촉선 면은 동해 용도 동이 탑지 다지는 저거도 다들 뉴몬버에서 뉴몬고 고고 탑지는 소탈서 소설 탑아도 다 소소 동의를 조건도 상 해석 볼까로 이 조고 상통과 말이 소소 조고 상 로지게나 들이들 가지고 뉴몬고 거래 될 소설 탑아서
And so it's first necessary to recognize the causes of suffering. That is very important. So it is said, again, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. So it is very important first to, again and again, think about the faults of self-grasping, of the selfish attitude, and recognize that to be the cause of all suffering. There is no suffering that does not arise from self-grasping. All the afflictions, all suffering arises from self-grasping. And so therefore, whatever we do with an afflicted state of mind can only result in suffering, temporarily and ultimately. So if you first understand that, then you should consider, then what is the antidote to that, to self-grasping? The only antidote is bodhicitta. And so now it is the conventional bodhicitta, or relative bodhicitta. So again, relative or conventional here points to the cause of suffering, and then bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment, that points to purifying that cause of suffering through bodhicitta. So we are developing a beneficial aspect in our mind, and that is the altruistic mind. So the relative bodhicitta means to clear away, to purify self-grasping and to cultivate an altruistic mind. If you understand that, then whatever you do with body, speech and mind will naturally and slowly decrease the selfish mind and increase the altruistic mind. The self-grasping mind by nature is like a block of ice, and the altruistic mind is like warmth, heat. So it becomes the method to melt the ice. So this is how also we can understand it. So first you should recognize the preciousness of this altruistic mind. And if you recognize that, then for example when you relate to a loving friend, you will recognize that it's not the friend that is so precious, but it's love and compassion that is very precious. And if you understand it in this way, you will be able to sustain, to cherish and uphold this compassion, this altruistic mind. And then finally you will cultivate the relative bodhicitta. So first there is a method to develop bodhicitta where it has not yet arisen. And that is the practice of the pratimoksha, or the individual liberation path, the first one on the various levels of the path. It is the practice of the preliminaries, the four thoughts that turn the mind, and so on. So here we first, in the Pratimoksha path, we first understand that if I do not cultivate bodhicitta, I will suffer. Because self-grasping is the root of all suffering. So first of all, we recognize the afflictions as the root cause of suffering, and we don't want to suffer ourselves, so we avoid these afflictions. So in the beginning, therefore it is called individual liberation. We are concerned with liberating ourselves from suffering. Beginning practitioners cannot really think about others yet. So first we enter the path of individual liberation. We avoid the afflictive emotions in order to become liberated ourselves.
따와 조금 거를 따와 가리 조금도 되나 더 같이 되려고도 땅에서 낭발을 죽는 사람들 네파 동해지 강해지 빵고 장장을 추면서 담지 것도 속고 장장을 것도 빼지 본도 드리고 따와 저런도 세 따와 강을 좀 그렇게 때문에 속고 가려서 차서 거서 임바땅 지금 한번 임바땅을 임바라 때니 임바 강라티 삼태를 때니 거기 임바땅 말로 잡 딱 거기서 속고 차서 야 거기서 적디바 저참나 때니 물이 타서 삼바땅 이게 때니 시합 좀 차서 딱 지금 메시지가 대해서만 하고 그러나 오 때는 것도 다다 도게이나 최대 동행이 니버리지 얘다 이 뭐또 동행 설랑을 될 주고 그러지 대신아 오 마음 봐라 하마집에 다들 relate 다다 나게 동행 저기 하고네 미저 소설 빼샤면 오 나는 지금 맞다버스 야야스 진짜 강 답답한 게 전부 설사 못한 대다वर 레전드들이 라리 소리면은 송을 너무 강을 대니 뭘 지지 지위 니분 총송 소도 너무 가리도 이저 가리도 뉴모가 강을 제가리 니모 가리고도 듣기나 빼는 동서 현고말 소소 이나도 바디 뉴모가 쪽이니 뭐래 야 산쪽생 몸부터 라리 소리 맞다 보이나 발시 쪽이 두바디 야 뉴모 쪽이니 뭐래 현고말 소소 이나도 봐 현고말 누가 발시 쪽 대다올 하고는 들랑그 남들랑 토고요래 배나 라왕랑 토고요래 다들 동네 다니 제발 라왕랑 토서 마음과 내가 저저 라왕랑 토서 좀 소소라래 대다버더니 내가 제발지 하고 듣더래지
And so this previous verse then said, not knowing the interdependence of cause and effect, they are ignorant of the true meaning of knowable things. So what are they really ignorant of? For example, there are some people who are holding quite a worldly, samsaric view, and some of them belittle Buddhists a bit, and they say, so actually it's very clear, all those who are sick and who suffer, all the beggars become Buddhists, and all those who are rich and happy are not Buddhists, have no religion. So it clearly seems to be that way. So this is just like an outer, like how it seems on the outer level. But then if you really look at it, look at those rich people, for example, how come they're rich? It is because in a past life they have practiced generosity. And why have they done that? They have been generous because they have cultivated love, compassion, kindness. So they have given to others, they have helped others, and now in this life they are rich. Or if there's somebody who has a nice body, because they have practiced moral conduct in the past, they now have a precious human body. And then those who have great wisdom have developed that through love and compassion, and so on. So all of the happiness, even in a worldly sense, we can understand it to arise from these perfections. And for example, we would see ourselves now as those suffering ones who practice the Dharma. But it is true, the Dharma is the antidote to suffering, and whoever suffers certainly has a need for the Dharma. So it is said, if you wish to know what you did in the past, look at your present body. So the Dharma helps you to understand the causes of your present happiness or suffering. For example, if you are poor, then you can think that I'm poor now, and that is because I have stolen in the past. So of course I'm poor now as a result. So now I should practice generosity as well as I can. Or likewise, you can follow any of the other verses of the 37 practices. For any kind of difficulty or suffering, there is an antidote that you can practice with diligence. And so you can just look at your own situation. What is my problem? And then what is the cause of that problem? What affliction leads to that problem? And what is the antidote to that? And for example, as an antidote to the afflictions, we offer the 7-limb prayer of accumulating merit and purifying obscurations to higher fields. And these 7 limbs are an antidote to the 6 afflictions. Or from the perspective of Bodhichitta and the 37 practices, we practice the 6 paramita, which are an antidote to the 6 afflictions. So towards the higher fields, we practice those 7 limbs, and towards the lower fields in this world, we practice the 6 paramitas. But they all are an antidote to the 6 afflictions. So if you understand that, you have found a method to secure your own path. Right now, you will be able to accept the suffering. You will obtain the freedom to accept the suffering you experience. And the freedom of the future is you have the freedom to create your own happiness in the future. And then whether or not you're actually creating it is up to yourself. But it is very powerful to understand that.
O mane be me ho re, o mane be me ho re, o mane be me. Tata untuk sanjung sengke koni,做准备的，一起接吧。这里我说了对吧？生活那里做上准备一起接吧嘞，对不对？哦，拍起我说什么到早起不嘞，的那拍起去，我说从早起不嘞是，开始接啊，嘛，两。건 초습니다. 제와요 봐. 대라서 봐서 이제 박차를 되고 줬음. 자치 모래 상부 요리 동문에서 봐대. 이치지가 돼봤어. 이치지 돼봤지. 오, 이제 산속 샘데 제가 체력 탐지 내가 이제 아침 뭐 내려셔서. 나한테 미빠도 동해 탐지 따와 내려셔. sentir 딱 빠진다. 그럼 탐지라. 나당고서 나바가 잠도 생기 로박감네. 락받는 것도 따블라마. 지미도 저게 송고요래. 닌 강은 초반 초다양. 쇼게 내와다 내가 저당 내버려지 대티 kim보레스. 내와다 내가 저 강에 소소소 쳐버리지. 소소 삼지 같이 우리 오 문이 삼지들이 나 다치 보니 저게 진거레스. 능이 너 능이 저당 잡아 저기 다 가지는 nga 사람들이 nga 온지 말에 남에 봐라 나도 좀 와사지가 송을 자치고 nga 온지 말에 랑 다다 nga들이 네 파트선 거 노바테로디 제야 보시송들이 년 가격이 몇 참았지 오 이핀 체디 상아 이핀 삼제도 그 한동 접로 있어 가리세는 저 나지 이핀으로 세고르다 이핀 돌레기 그 나지 세고르지 나지 제기나 되게 이핀으로 라로르다 나한테로 설때 샘티 전 차름라고 차로 우리 뒤쳐와하고 월 이피로 된 차름들 파니메쇼한 파쇼로 우리 대외 동탐고 된 발라요 동 민기께는 뒤시랍게 우리 민기는 마음대로 시랍대 시랍람 생바대 시랍 양사바 연구로 말해서 제가 사비게 해다는 해요래 짐제 퍼송 마도 버다미 도장 상부자지 나도 동반이 봐 우리 메디 봐서 하고 그래 루 더치는 밥샘 돈일 밥살 나무도 다 마비다 그 셔살이 요 말이지 하고 그러 얘는 돈이 희바삼지 레다 박차 마세는 등이 양도 용구를 사지 공포 맡아 받는 눈치야 요 말와 대외 이시제 대바 다침벌 이시 대바 남영들이 민신 제거를 해서
So then coming back to the relative bodhicitta. So in the relative bodhicitta, what is most important is to develop trust in karma, cause and effect. And so we are devoted, we give rise to devotion to the three jewels. And of those three different types of devotion, the trust in karma, the trusting devotion in karma is most important. So many people hold the three jewels as very precious, and that is because already in past lives they have established a connection to the three jewels, and due to this imprint they now consider the three jewels as very precious. But then while this is like a valid devotion, of all the different forms of devotion, what is most important is the trusting faith or devotion, and that is the trusting karma. And when we cultivate trust in karma, we understand that the cause of bodhicitta will lead to happiness in all future lifetimes. Therefore, it is very precious. And the cause of self-grasping surely is the root of all suffering. So, and that is what we should remember in all our activities. So in the Buddhist practices, we always in the beginning read the refuge and the motivation. And regarding that, my root guru, Jime Dorje, has said that whatever you practice throughout the entire day, first and foremost in the morning, it is most important that you contemplate this line, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. So here you should really ask yourself, how much of that do I have? How much love and compassion do I have? And every time you think about it, remember the preciousness of kindness and compassion. And then when you read, may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, recognize what actually is the cause of suffering. It is to always think of I all the time. It is the perception of an I. And the Buddha had taught that sentient beings perceive a self where there actually is no self. So whatever we do, we consider ourselves as most important. And that is what we need to recognize, that I is our only and true enemy. So then throughout the entire day of practicing virtue, think that whatever I do is for the purpose of others, in order to benefit others. And this intention actually will accomplish your own purpose. So how does it accomplish your own purpose? It is because through cultivating altruism for others, self-grasping will become lesser and lesser, will become exhausted. Every time you give rise to altruism, self-grasping diminishes. And likewise, every time you grasp at a self, you lose your altruism. The self-grasping mind is like a block of ice. You should understand that through feeling how it feels when you're selfish. And the altruistic mind is like the sun that melts the ice block. And that is also necessary in order to ultimately realize the ultimate truth. It is only if you cultivate compassion that true wisdom can arise. If you do not first give rise to compassion, then the wisdom you develop will only be ordinary, but it will not be true, genuine wisdom. Vajradhara said in the words of advice, he said that if you do not realize the workings of karma, cause and effect, even though you might understand selflessness, the emptiness of a self, you will still not attain enlightenment. So if you understand emptiness, you might understand that the body is composed of atomic particles, which ultimately are empty, and the mind is empty. But still, then it might lead to like a materialistic view of thinking that after you die, you're just gone. The mind is just emptiness. And so it is important to think about karma, cause and effect until you attain enlightenment. For as long as there are karmas and habitual imprints in the mind, for as long as they are not exhausted, you will not reach enlightenment. So it is important to develop trust in that. So of all the different forms of faith or devotion, most important is to develop a faith in the workings of karma. So in that contemplation, you should make a continuous effort. Oh, this is the natural sound of Dharmata.
the machine tani tanjiti khanda tata rikpa dhama dhala tini kota tesum dhama dhama bo zo yori ten khama so zo khanda la yobo kyabde sheki yori toto chulok jibade tini tama na bona yiresi 강리 되는 밀리만 고고 통하래스 요바 지팅 감도 뭐 요르바스 근데 요 말이도 주더라고 요라스 현감도 니와 강성나 자네 토비아마도 와스 매바도 요더라고 요레스 다치도 고바 말왜 돼 대시기 요리 대처를 다 늘었더니 딱히 따와라. 따와 그 젠저부터는 요구요래. 너가 따와니. 딱걸 따와지 그난 직딩 카드 뭐래. 오. 진짜 맞는데 무슨 썰 따버는지나. 그게 뭐래 싶다 때나. 그렇게 매발 따와 말이지. 람이기 매발 차디고. 니가 주제가 람지 봐. 너들 공부하다가 주제도 이미 맞다봐 임버서. 대티는 밤나 빼나 가다 저기 때나 무슨 매번 통고요. 그렇게 드니티는 받고 열매. 요거 들어가서 요 말이 되라고요 말이지. 빼나. 됐잖아. 오, 가다 능력이 동담고 대바티는 받도 무슨 매배시다는 밤나. 호텔 얘기는 받고 그래. 나진님이 봐. 대티는 받고 그래. 매봐서 요리 되나? 원친이 공유남 거니 말람 생구 박차든 콜크 요리 산이 샷사지 체는 말람 따왜 로차버리 마음거더니 바도데 말람 따왜 따니 세야 말람데 누구 무슨 용구 요리 다지 말람데 무슨 차데 요리 체도 말람 따왜 차로 지보야 안 다지 제발 가린다고 대회나더니 이제 소고 소면 체다당 서마 바도선 깨그레스 대회에서 다 체들아 이마다 되나? 이 주로 다 쳐들 그러나. 오, 체는 무슨 통영대 제거람지 마다봐. 좀 마다봐. 드라마다봐. 낭sem 남도 마다봐. 대하 고동사나. 그때다 핀이 차장가 똑바지. 마다봐는 진짜 그거래.
So the scriptures and the various forms of reasoning explain how we accumulate karma with a self-grasping mind, and then how this karma ripens. So most of you have heard about that, know about that. Maybe some of you do not know about that, so I will explain that briefly as well as I can. So those who do not understand karma precisely in this world and hold all kinds of views, they create all sorts of doubts because they do not clearly understand. For example, when I was in prison, there was a view held by many of the officials that religion is like drugs or like poison. It is just a lie, a deception. Because clearly we can see that already existing things in this world really exist, and you're saying that they don't. And then, however, you're talking about those pure lands that nobody can see, and nobody can find anywhere. So you're claiming that something that's nowhere actually exists then. So that's really very foolish. So this was one of those views held. So in brief, all the various mistaken views are included within two, the eternalist and the nihilist view. Eternalism, somebody who holds an eternalist view, believes that everything in this world is real, and they always perceive it that way. But when religion says, and the Dharma says that things do not exist, the Dharma does not destroy the existence of things, it is just how things really are. And that is because the entire universe and all sentient beings by nature are compounded. And whatever is compounded is by nature impermanent. And so for this reason, we say that things really lack inherent existence. And some people actually can see it that way, actually perceive it that way. So the Dharma does not just arbitrarily for no reason say things don't exist, but actually things do not inherently exist, and it is established in those teachings. And then on the ultimate level, when one realizes non-dual primordial wisdom, then one realizes how things lack inherent existence. This is what one realizes then. So first here one realizes that self and others do not exist. And it is only that we believe that it exists. So we believe in the existence of something that doesn't actually exist that way. For example, when you are dreaming at night, when you're sleeping, your dream, you're wandering in your dream. What is wandering is your habitual imprints being activated in the dream. And this is what will continue after you have died later on. After you have died, then this entire lifetime will appear just like a dream. The reality of this life is gone, and you will look back to it like a dream. And then you awaken in the dream-like state of the bardo, but at this time, although it is dreamlike, you're not actually awakening from it again. And you're experiencing a reality of suffering, just like in this life. And this life is just like a dream. So then really what is the difference between them? There really is no difference. And so therefore, Jigten Sumgön had said, in this life, the bardo and future lives are actually one. So if you see this life as an illusion, then what you're seeing is you see the things that appear in this life, but you also understand that things are compounded and therefore they are impermanent. So therefore anything that you encounter, actually, you see its impermanent, fleeting nature. For example, all forms that you see are impermanent. All sounds are impermanent. All thoughts in the mind are impermanent. And if you understand that, you can also see the impermanence of those thoughts you have towards others, like attachment and aversion.
Makan toa zinji yo bateri go yore tewen zini terti tetomang bo yore tini nangba ta ngune da ha ko tong tana lu mi yi ka ma yin ba kang la tong pa yi ro ta la jia ro yin song du san chok chen ge rang yi na ma chen de la so de wa de ji ba san chok chen du de de ji sam ji san chok chen min zhong yin na san chok chen cha da ge ba la ti da bo chen ka lu chok yore ya jo dadi ni nyu mo ba sawali levela ta tan ji kam dan yang o nya wan de de musu mang ma da na ti dungi sam nyam ba cha ma nya ba cha dam sok chu dok de la so ba tham ji ta musu de ni cha dam yo ba le de o ti nya wan musu le ti nya wan musu ma ri nya wan musu chok dong go le Dele tawo ya ta ko chin kan re wa jaksa dele yi ma nya wa ni song dong ni su yo ba dele ga ba tabla yi ji wa ni cha na de ko do ko tem ba song tong da gu ni tong ba ni song ko de ta ta ring bo li tong da gu ni ngo de sa bu ko do ko de ma de dum de se wa me ba dele yi ya ko ji na dele yi ji ni ni da sam ni ji de za chi bo li se ha ko ngo de da sam ni ji de za chi bo li se ha ko na de sam ni ji chi bo ju li ji na che me be ji chi bo che me be ye rang lo ji na de te de da me be ye ni tong gu yo li da da yi ni me ba de de tong dang gu de ba so da de ma ze ba de sem de nyong wa ji chot ta ba cha de yo li chok rang yi na me ya shi tup je ma li de nyong ma tang ni se wa ta ko do jim de ba ti jim de pa nang che ji de la ni so ju ma de nang ji de rang de te ki che bu yo li
And so often people, even also in Buddhism, have some doubts whether those hell realms and pure lands in this universe actually exist. And so that doubt arises because, according to a scientific view, we have to understand everything very in depth, very precisely. We need to actually be able to see it. We need to be able to touch it. And only then we believe it. And so because of that, there are doubts about the existence of hell, Ram, and Pure Lands. And however, if you really understand the Buddhist view, and the Buddhist view teaches that it is beyond existence and non-existence, neither existing nor non-existing. It is that when there is emptiness, anything can arise within emptiness. So in this lifetime, for example, if you cultivate even just the slightest bodhicitta, the result will be happiness. It is the result of bodhicitta. So if that is the case, then also it is proper to say that a Pure Land could exist as a result of bodhicitta. And likewise, the cause of self-grasping leads to the afflictions, which leads to all the suffering in this world. And we can also see it in this world. It is just like hell in many places, even if we don't actually call it the hell realm, but it is just like hell, the suffering. For example, the suffering of heat and cold, of being killed and abused and so forth, of hunger and thirst. All of that is just like a hell-like suffering that is actually there in this world, and we can actually see it. And so, but then one might wonder, but is that really hell? Even though it is not the hell realm, it is the hell-like suffering. So then, if it's not really hell, can we create a real hell? So we can actually, of course, create a real hell, just as we can create a Pure Land. If we develop or trust in karma, we can develop the Pure Land. Or we can experience the suffering of the hell realms in the lower realms. And there we experience actual, a reality of true suffering. So understanding the relative truth is to trust that there is a way to overcome this real suffering of the lower realms, of the hells and so on. And then later on, we realize the ultimate truth, where we are introduced to emptiness, but that is still quite distant. First, we need to really understand the conventional, the relative truth, and really develop a firm trust in the infallibility of karma, cause and effect. And that is to understand the preciousness of love and compassion. So if you understand that, it will arise in your mind and develop into immeasurable compassion, or the four immeasurables. And that will finally destroy self-grasping. And then you will finally see the truth of selflessness. And then you realize that self and others do not exist. And you realize thereby the ultimate truth. But for as long as the mind is disturbed like murky water by self-grasping, you cannot actually realize the ultimate truth. First, that pollution of the mind need to be cleared away. And that is cleared away by, first of all, understanding the workings of karma, and then also practicing in accordance with that, practicing what should be done and giving up what should be given up, and especially practicing according to the 37 bodhisattva practices.
Tata dungi kari jongwa di jyose kawa dukte jyose rangi sengu tori chor shina ini tata rang yu le yore perda tata zabalingi dungi chechu kari de tawa tsini yarje la song ta jakab chipa kani chipori ngini chani yinda jakab kashi nima takpan chukwa jana ta dungi kari yungu do mati kaun chukwa jabde yore te koto ti jandu yore maari ta tira ta jyoche yore the judge carrying some of the jolly the Tambo John was on the tea, don't get on the body. I jack up the jarto on my man, I please you make up king, but drama, that's what tea is hungry. Tea don't get on the body. Driver not how that don't get that, must tell me, good missy. Oh, that's so mean we are better. The mean but lady drop up and do it. Good up to the flower, maybe dinner. Me part the me good lady in his own day. She don't go to your money. Saji Saga, my captain. Be hungry. Penang so. Bayok Javora. Bayok Javo dinner. 자보즈기 마 고송 농포 선랑 같이 요리야 자가 잘못을 답지 세송으로와 약간은 세로로와 기 라무더티 저때 무송게 수고 레나 대사는 세로로래 네. 오 저때상 고마트 센터에서 라고 센터에 조요로 야 저때서 마사나 별은 아리 나무스는 요리 나 좋아하지 무슨 마타마 떠니 니마카라 치투죠 난 남쪽에 약해요 살마음이 잡아먹고 저때다다 공치는 거 ቆ는다 맨날 무슨 돈 잡을 약을 도도지로서 저막 제일 꼴대 나디 이거 막 요리야 야 나디 이거 막 공사 약해요 이런 거 메모고 다서 같이 세서 오 준비 거 소태상 오 무시스 라고 소리 해면은 다산다 뒤에서 들이달 배 다른 날 타요라 오 대리에서 대고는 무슨 우리 돌면 오 준비서 왔미 말이지 내도 과도 잖아 오딱 마사바 같이 버리지 마사로 소속이 가는 송나 소속을 동해도 좀 홍보도 왔어 자다 이게 문제 동해 용어다 그 저사서나 수장 고포 타면도 왔어 디고를 싸먹었던 것들이 들이 고아도 잘 들이 빼야고 그랬어
So understanding that if whatever is you're suffering at the present, you need to identify where does it actually come from, what is the cause of this suffering. And you should find this suffering, the cause of that suffering within your own mind. In this world, for example, what is the greatest suffering in this world? There are, for example, some countries that through science have really developed and are very well and happy. But then there's other countries too where there's constant wars and violence, and their entire life people are caught in war and violence. Do they want that? Clearly nobody would want that, but the cause is present, so it ripens. So how does it ripen? It is that the cause is negative karmas and obscurations, evil deeds. So the cause lies in various actions we have committed in previous lives. And then secondly, the condition are the evil spirits, the hindrances and the obstacles and so on. So in that case, the cause has been created, and then the condition is people are fighting with each other, wars break out, and so on. And so all of that is the condition that makes it the suffering conducive to ripen. And then the result is suffering, illness, and so forth. So if the cause and conditions are present, then certainly a result will ripen from that. So from an action, a result will ripen. Karma is infallible. And if the cause is present, it will certainly ripen. And once it is present, there is nothing that we can do about it. Nobody can prevent it from ripening any longer if the cause has been created. Even a Buddha could not prevent the cause from ripening. For example, in the past there have been, for example, a Nepali king or the princess of India and so forth. They have been killed, assassinated by armies and their own regime. And even though they were well protected with bodyguards and their own army and soldiers, but nothing could protect them if the cause has been created and the condition was present, then that leads to the result of being killed because the cause was already present. If the cause is present, then there's nothing that can be done to prevent it from ripening if the condition arises. So that is important to resolve. And likewise, if the cause is absent, even if you're in the midst of warfare, you will not be killed. For example, I'm an example of that. I was in the midst of a war, and our army was already destroyed. At that time, we were like surrounded we were in a mountain. Some of our soldiers in the army, we were surrounded in the mountain, and from all sides and plains, there was no way to escape. So the armies of 4 different provinces were there to surround the mountain, and most people could not escape from there because there was no condition to escape. But still, some of us, like myself, somehow did not get killed and was able to escape. And that is because the karma was not present. So if the karma is not present, then even if you are bombarded with weapons and arrows, you still will be liberated. And so I have myself experienced the infallibility of karma on my own body, in my own life. So for this reason, it is important not to create the causes of suffering, because once they are created, there's nothing we can do to avoid them. If they are not created, then there is no source, there's no origin for suffering to arise. Suffering cannot arise. But if the cause of suffering is present, if suffering arises, then there is nothing that anybody can do to avoid the suffering. So it is very helpful and very important to understand this.
내가 전이다 뉴문보 탐지는 동에다와 해당을 차도래 뉴문보 동아가는 딘제외한테 셔도 동카와 카차와 강리 다지 속주 동작 데라소바리 대상진 제버때 강 레데다와 사나 레적사타나 데라 제버 예명고요래 당보 남hin진 제버티 냐와데 간리지나 해당기 그 심기 참아 노도적 차는 거 조바적으로 차는 거래 레저 남밤이 바지 남민지나 야 뉴모가 소소 가리 촉질 대ኛ도 차서나 빼나 담매 계상집만 말합도 한장 강바적는 야자를 고쳐 가리치 그리 다다랑 뺏이지로 저거 동 저섭세 다 강터터서라 비당도 야와지랑 진지고 야와 강에서 나디니 송아리 나디니 땅아 파지마서 노바땅을 같이 노바땅 말람라들이 동송어 세송어 야무를 파세 독대단장 땅을 요리지 막차 남인지 되버 야왕고스에서 용구로라 야와르기 대니 왕가 되버지 가시 양 개버지가 돼서 요 개버지버었네 매열을 지와린 거요리 매열을 지와는 왕지나 라왕 따와는 요르마니 소왕치고 해당대 왕치고래 해당 왕치디 다 롱바티도 다 촉과 작사들라 양 해당 롱바티로 다 기와린이로 왕근 되버지 남인지 되버 야와 왕근 되버 다 멀리토나 다 롱바 독자에서 제로 요래 라왕 자수 간이라노 생부 라왕 전에 해당 왕도 초송 제 해당 왕도 다 해당도 코 가와요 지와세랑 통 해당을 내라 자도 다 롱관 촉과 진작사 탐지 또 사마지 않고 해당을 내서 세대 내가 제도 요래 내가 맞게는 롱과 이다를 내요는 다 콘서트는 이집트는 로고로 내가 드리는 쇼크는 망보요로 인지 문제 드리는 쇼네 내 대화를 건 다 남인진 제가 야와 용성 다 왕을 제가 그 롱방이 바를 지와 랑성 다 김준진 제가 김준진 제가 다 내가 촉과 다야 돼 세리제야 대 김준진 뭐 제바 가는 김준진 제가 파노바당 그지 철노바당 다 비슷 다 촉과 다야 약간 펜싱 야 기대다가 김준진 제가 세바 김준 파노바당 거리 노아주도 철노바당 거리 최산이 약간 당시엔 촉과 총산이 다 도핀지 로빈신 발라 다 제로 해당 당쪽 세리라서 총총 망보는 거 대다 이게 해당을 특별히 종아리 타마티 레 양모 도다 도지 발라 상지 하정지로 도지나 노차를 진 차도는 해당을 진이 상지 상마 해당을 주는 아니 뭐티는 동기 ramji 당부 대화에 말든 도탈 동에 전도라 쳔랭 총숨 동에 쳔랭 총숨 되니 세상을 내는 거니 탁톡 봐도 대답에 제가 새로 통화를 대답에 세상 저 쪽으로 상무선 근데 유무 뭐 탐시 대답에 남의 인제 예다 유무 뭐 쪽대라 노아도 매년 그요래 대레레로 상무선 디 동에 상무선 디 자와서 가도 디 자와서 오 아주 오 말문이 세상도 말 차상도 다다 메나 마고 자자자 같은 지아리누 이거를 사업 맞이를 줄래 도로요 말이 이게 문제 지아리지 지아리다 라왕도 고동 마도 이왕지 다 대서 지아랑도 다 동이 받으면 용고요 하고니 들이라거랑 참 좋으로 봐. 오 세상지 와서 다 우리다 세상 먹어서 대서 매바 요바드네 야와게도 용조리 다들 매바 요바도 가래 되지 요바 매바도 체들이 신차 치고나 대르지 차단도 똑같이 체등은 있는 주제가 남지 주막답에 주제 뭐다 봐요 봐 무슨 하고 그래 오 고치질 딱 받는 다들 요바 매바 당지도 네 자주로 마법체로
And so, of all the afflictive emotions, then especially the root of suffering especially arises from anger, hatred, or jealousy, of all the 5 poisons. And the result will be intense suffering. So there is a way that each of those afflictions then ripens. For example, when we engage in karma in action with a mind of anger or hatred, and then we kill and we abuse, we beat, and so on. And once a karma is created, a result will ripen. And more precisely, one karma, one action, has a 4-fold result, ripens in 4 different ways. So first of all, the first ripening, the first result is called the result of full maturation. So first of all, we take anger as an example. As a result, a full ripening result of anger or hatred, you are born in the hell realm. And the hell realm then, so that is the full ripening. The hell realm is then that place where all the sentient beings who hold hatred and anger meets together, just like a city, one place. And this is true for any of the affliction, whatever is the strongest. Those beings who have that affliction will all meet together in that place and form that realm. So just imagine how that would be if you would lock all the people with anger and hatred into one room, all the nasty people into one room. What would happen in that room? And people would hit each other, kill each other, they would abuse each other, they would be nasty to each other only because they're all nasty people. And so in the same way, all those sentient beings who hold anger and hatred will gather together in hell. So it all arises from self-grasping. It comes from the wish to harm others. And that we can even observe in our dreams. When you dream, even in our dreams, you dream of killing others, or you hurt or beat others, or you're hit or killed in return, and so on. So there are real experiences of the hell realm, even in our dreams. So that is the first result, the full maturation. The second result is called the determining result. And that is afterwards, after the hell realm, as a result of some slight virtue, you might be born again in the human realm, and then the determining effect, a result, will come into effect. And so that means that you will be born in a certain place in the human realm without any choice. And so, for example, if the karma has come from anger, if you're liberated from hell, then you take birth in a place where there are wars, a very negative, a very harmful place. So first you are in hell as a full maturation result. Secondly, the determining result determines the place of rebirth. So without any choice, you are determined to be born in that specific place. So you have no self-determination. It is determined by the anger, the hatred in the mind. And so that remains within the mind. And so therefore you're born in a war zone, for example, in a country where there is war. And so all of those who are born in such a place hold that karma of having cultivated hatred or actions of hatred in the past life. And even some people who are not born in a war zone, they travel to a war zone, or they want to go to a war zone. Nowadays, that happens too. People who are in other countries, they see some kind of happiness of going to the war zone, and then they actually voluntarily go there. So that is also this kind of determining result. So you go there, or you're born in this war zone or very difficult place of suffering. So that's the second one. Then the third result is called the result that is similar to the cause. And that is that once you're born in that place, you will continue to engage in similar actions. So if you're born in this war zone, again you will fight, and again you will kill. So there is the action that is similar to the cause, and the experience that is similar to the cause. So for the action, you will have a tendency to engage in similar actions. Again, you will fight and harm others. And for the experience, you will again experience the similar experiences of being killed and harmed by others. And so thinking about war zones is thinking about in a large sense, on a large scale. But even on a smaller scale, it ripens, for example, between friends, between people. Even though people at one point are good friends, at another point they get angry, they fight and even kill each other. So all of that is this action of hatred, of anger. For example, some friends may have shared great love and great kindness with each other for a long time, but then that love leads to attachment, and then the attachment leads to jealousy, and the jealousy leads to anger, and then all that love becomes anger. And this entire life becomes just suffering by nature. So what has been happiness in the beginning, in the end, turns into suffering. So we can observe that on a larger, middling, and more lesser scale. But it all ripens in suffering. So this is just taking the karma of hatred or anger as an example. And that the same is true for all the other afflictions. For example, we are born as a hungry ghost, or anywhere else in the 6 realms of samsara. So you think about each of those afflictions and what kind of ripening they lead to. Think about the suffering that it leads to and the root of that suffering, and try to find it within your own mind. Look at your own mind and see that there is the anger, or there is the jealousy. I actually have that. And so for as long as I have that, even if I do not suffer right now, in the future, for sure it will lead to great suffering again, until it becomes destroyed. It will always lead to suffering if it is present. So you lack any choice. You are controlled completely by those afflictions. And these will lead to incredible suffering. So if you know that, then you're able to restrain yourself by holding your own law and thinking that by all means, I do not want to have this hatred. That is my true enemy. And think about the result of the hell realm, the suffering of the hell realm. So when we do that, when we understand the suffering of the hell realm, then we are really, this is what some have called, we are creating an existence where there is no existence. But on the other hand, when we are attached to this lifetime, then we always give rise to thoughts of attachment and aversion. And actually, this lifetime is a compound, it is impermanent, and therefore like an illusion. But people hold it to be true. And this is how they create something that isn't true to be true. And for this reason, people holding these wrong views always then denigrate their religious paths.
그래서 로마 평소에 담지 좀리가 겁라 로마 사바가 능바를 저한테 난 로마 능바 담지 빼냠 노요 보여래 제기서 대다다래 로마 거바데 프로바이 로마지가 들이소 탱기 잡으래 또 아티샤게 남타나나 요래 이제 좀 웃었더니 섬지 담지 잡고 요래 다른 조디는 그 로마 담자가 얘기를 요래 로마 거바를 청기지 섬지 아마 따버래 빠지게 웃었더니 뭐소라 소톱이 요래 그래서 빠지 섬이 살주기 정도도 먹던 섬이 샷봐 그 뭐라는 우리 소리 야잖아 그 모르시고는 저 차로니 그래서 지금 우리 섬을 샤는더니 섬들 저발을 했다 되게 속적 제트고 요래 나지를 또 없고 요래 그라 고바적 섬이 샤는 게 맞지 못하고 제소서 냠용이 배 들이 알아요 말지 주로 잡이 장 가리고 생아이 이는 게 맞대야 고바고 그건 고바서로 제요래 그래서 오늘 좀다 고소로 타고 그래 저소로 같이 피나 좀다 저소나 타고 피티니가 피기 요래 좀을 피는 타고 때문에 피는 데서 요래 좀을 때려 하고 피는 그 무슨 상고 로트 받고 송 무슨 일 봐요래 락제 와도 요래 그치 모르겠더니 주로 담지 시라지 사람 빼나 그 취지 돌는 난 그러더니 대서 겁이야 사자치 모르 초대인데 뭐 이종 라사가 산업 탐지 초대인은 맨 끼껴요 말이 르네사지 지문으로 떨어졌고 탐지 대서 톱 요래 된 초대인은 요래 근데 알자카도 초대인은 버려요래 뭐야 보자 들이시라야 보이 제가 뭐 파파토지치
So also it would be good that now if you amongst each other disciples discuss the karma and so forth with each other. So the newer disciples should ask questions to the more senior disciples, because many of the senior disciples have a very good experience. So you should exchange and ask questions to each other. And then also today I'm offering to you this image of Tara, white Tara. And this Tara actually has protected my own life about 8 times. And this particular Tara also comes from the life story of Atisha, and also she protected Atisha in his life, and he also recognized that she is really the protectress of all sentient beings. Also in our stupa we have a description of Tara, and so after she had attained enlightenment she became like the mother of all sentient beings. So this Tara, as in this image, has protected my own life. This is my own personal experience. And when you practice Tara, it is important that she really actually appears in your mind. So you can look at the image, close your eyes, and just have the image appear in your mind. So that is important. Because every time the image appears in your mind, obscurations and self-grasping is cleared away. And also actually you can put the image into your car, into your windshield, so that it is reflected back to you when you are driving, when you're looking at the glass, the windshield. So you put it on this this surface, this board, yeah, and so then the pictures reflected back to you through the windshield. And then also when you're driving, actually it becomes a protection for you. So just to have this image appear in your mind is very powerful. That is my own experience. So many times disciples, my Dharma friends, also ask, what do you need? And so what I really want to make, what I then say is that I want to make those images, those forms of Tara. And then there are very kind donors who actually actualize that. And in that way, the one who creates it, like the donor, has an immense benefit, and then the one who distributes it, like myself, also has some benefit, and then especially the one who holds it and who practices it, who receives it, really has the greatest benefit. So this image of Tara is an actual Nirmanakaya emanation. It is like an artist and Nirmanakaya manifestation. And it is the actual deity. And the actual deity is love, has great love. And that is why it is so powerful. So, my Dharma friends, consider this practice, Tara, have it appear in your mind. Meditate for a bit in the break time. This is a very special place. Also go around the stupa, which is also very precious. In the stupa especially, we have contained many of the great blessings that came from Tibet, from the old days of the holy places in the capital, and which have been destroyed actually through the Cultural Revolution. And so these Chinese and Nepali and so on blessings, all of these have been demolished, and some of them we have been able to rescue and receive, and they are contained within the stupa. So it is very precious. And this stupa is an offering to this country of America. So go there and make your prayers there. Have a nice lunch, and thank you for coming.
드와트리가 딱바로 소바소도 고요리 드와트리 가르쳐 보요나 드니 두부는 보체다 그는 보체게 이게 진기요래 드링알 드와 가르쳐 오요나 이게 지요나 얘기는 셀린데 저고요리 드와트리 하장 가르쳐 버리지 얘는 두치도 소바 검자야다 기쳐 버리 무슨 소바 또지디 드와트리 오늘 드린 기는 보체 다 두부는 보체 두부는 보체 양성 요고요리 다오지 그니 내가 안에 something 요리 이게 사마시 요리 자케시 요리 이 좋아지지 좁아래.
So also during the Drupchen time, later during the retreat, if you have any questions come up during the Drupchen. It is. So I personally will have to practice around the clock all the time. So I might not be able to talk to you personally, but if you have any very pressing question during the Drupchen, you can also ask Drupal Rinpoche and Ken Rinpoche here who know English. And also, if there's any pressing question to myself, you can write it down, and then also in written form, maybe I can give an answer. And so that is only if there is something that is really pressing, because mostly during the Drupchen, we should focus on meditation. So you can ask Ken Rinpoche, who knows English, and Drupal Rinpoche, who might need a translator. And then also there's Annie Samten, who you should ask questions, who can answer your questions, and she knows English and Chinese.
좋아요. 휴지. 로마사님이 바로 좋아하네. 로마님 봤더니 비냐미야 볼. 그것도 밑에 가오가냐도 로요리. 네 가르치야 거기 시요리. 응래잖아요. 로마 편집지는 약수제리 저도 찔러거래.
So, but the best way of asking question is for the newer disciples to ask the older, the senior disciples, because the senior disciples have a really great experience, because for many years, a long time, they have been with me together. So whatever I would tell you, that's what they also know. So the best, in the best case, if you would have any question, is to ask any of the senior disciples.
좋아들이 전부 다 힘이 이가를 피용요리 내가 냠용요 왜 고추 좋아를 뛰는 거 뺑키 받쳐서 좋아 좀 삼게 두기치 힘을 피용 삼점을 잡아요리
And actually, asking questions is beneficial for the one who asks the question, but actually also for the one who answers the question. That's my own experience. because through receiving those questions and answering the questions, I really have become very knowledgeable, very skillful. So I'm very thankful to those who ask the questions, because it helps me, the one who answers the questions. So actually the one who answers them has the greatest benefit.